A brawny man stood guard outside, so that was the situation. The citizens of this town were under the outlaws' collective thumb. They were keeping the women and children as hostages. That apology earlier was it for getting Xiaohong involved. But then the townspeople were equally victims. Maomao didn't yet know for certain what the words meant. Their guide brought them to a plump middle-aged woman who said newcomers. She looked Maomao and Xiaohong up and down. Beanstalks, both of them. Do you think we can use them? The Laoshi brought them, didn't he? Yes, they are fellow believers, the other woman replied. Was that older guy the Laoshi? He was probably a pastor or at least someone connected with the church, which would mean he wasn't one of the outlaws but a resident of this town. In other words, the people here are cooperating with the bandits or they are being forced to. That would explain the woman's apology. Then again, Maomao should have known sooner what kind of bandits carried farm implements. The pudgy woman looked at Maomao. Sorry kid, but I need you to take off everything you're wearing. It's all women in this room anyway. Strip down and then get changed. Yes, ma'am, Maomao replied. It didn't really bother her. She just started taking off her clothes. The room was, like the lady said, all women. She was also used to this from the routine body searches every time she entered the rear palace. There was just one teensy little problem. What's this, eh? That's a coagulant, ma'am. And this, an antipyretic. And what in the world is this? It treats coughs. The middle-aged woman was getting more and more impatient with the mountain of herbal medicine packets that was emerging from the folds of Maomao's robes. What's this one? She demanded. That's an energy tonic, Maomao replied. The item in question was the bottle that the buyer Roshi had given her. It's not an energy tonic, Maomao told herself. Snake venom would certainly spice up your alcohol. Just who are you? The middle-aged woman asked. A medicine woman, Maomao replied. It was the honest truth. There was no point trying to hide it now. Her makeup had tumbled out with other items, so she needed to decide how far she could stretch her story about being Xiaohong's mother. A medicine woman, huh? And this is your medicine? Keep it close then. It's better than letting that lot get a hold of it. They would just throw it away. I'm sure they have no idea what to do with it. The woman had appeared cold, but deep down she didn't seem like a bad person. Perhaps that was simply because she believed Maomao shared her faith. Maomao wasn't exactly a non-believer, but it would be better if they kept thinking she believed as they did. Change into something else. We will wash your clothes for you. Are you able to do the washing? Yes, ma'am. Also, if you'll forgive my asking, could we perhaps get the cargo from the wagon we were riding on? Sadly, no. Was there something important in there? Not particularly, but my well-loved copy of the scriptures was in that wagon. I was in the middle of teaching the girl. Xiaohong took that as her cue to cling tightly to Maomao. She's a fine little actor, Maomao thought. Perhaps she was being hopeful, but she thought Xiaohong might just be able to help her pull this off. To Maomao's relief, the other woman was completely taken in. The scriptures? Well, that won't do. I'll ask the teacher to help. The clothes they were given were rough, but they were of sturdy weave. The cotton outfits they had been wearing would have stood out too much in town. Besides, cotton was all well and good for a housewife travelling with a buyer Roshi, but for a couple of almost prisoners, the rough-hewn textiles better looked the part. All right, I've got things to do. See those girls over there about how you can help, the middle-aged woman said. Understood, ma'am, Maomao said, bowing politely. Now you listen, the woman added. If you don't pull your weight around here, they'll get rid of you without a second thought. If you want to survive, forget your cozy domestic life and work like you have never worked before. Treat nothing as beneath you. Maomao and Xiaohong both nodded energetically. Say, what were your names again? The woman asked. Oh, names, Maomao said, panicking. Was it safe to tell this woman their real names? One-eyed dragon obviously had it out for Shikyou, and if he realized Xiaohong was his niece, well, the thought frightened Maomao. But by the same token, if Jinshi was on Maomao's trail, she couldn't have him pass her up because he didn't know she was there. After a moment's consideration, she came up with Qingsheng and this is Xiaolan. The names meant Bear and Little Wolf respectively, but they were the best she could do on such short notice. She shot a look at Xiaohong, whose brow was furrowed as if she were looking at a caterpillar. Qingsheng and Xiaolan? Really? Aren't those names rather mannish? A woman asked in a friendly tone. She was the other woman who had been serving One-Eyed Dragon when Maomao had met him earlier. Her sun-baked skin made her look older than she was, but she said she was 17 years old. She already had 3 children, which at least confirmed that there was nothing strange about Maomao and Xiaohong posing as mother and child. Yes, they are, Maomao said. Women in my family are given strong names to make them resilient against sickness. She found the lie as easy as breathing. She could even keep peeling vegetables while she said it. The other woman had decided that her physique did not lend itself to physical labor, and had put her to work in the kitchen instead. Maomao peeled the vegetables and Xiaohong washed them. If this town had one thing going for it, it was that it was close to a water source, giving them the luxury of using more water than most places. At the moment, Maomao was peeling an ordinary white potato. She had seen enough of those to last her a lifetime. We may not have our freedom, but try to stay strong. At least it is better than being killed, said the other woman. She proved to be quite a talker. As they worked on the vegetables, she filled them in on the town's story. The place used to be bustling, but as soon as the swarm hit, people stopped visiting almost completely. Townsfolk with nowhere to turn joined the bandits, who thereby extended their power. Worse, that no account boss had shown up about a month before and taken over the town. The western capital had sent some soldiers to deal with the situation, but they had been massacred. No wonder the western capital hadn't had any reports. It has been a month. The situation was worse than they had thought. Our strongest villagers tried to fight back, but the bandits killed them all. That clown calling himself One-Eyed Dragon might not be very bright, but he has the muscles to make up for it. The Laoshi was the one who suggested we should go along with him. He said there was no chance we could stand against One-Eyed Dragon ourselves. The Laoshi that would be the man of faith who had captured Maomao and Xiaohong made the suggestion that brought them to this moment. Could their Laoshi not see this couldn't go on for long? With no way to break out of this situation, perhaps he was simply hoping to live a little longer. Maomao was still thinking about it as she tossed the peeled potato into a bucket. Where should we throw away the peels? We don't throw them away. We stir-fry them and use them as feed for the last of the unbelievers, the other woman told her with a look of disgust. I can't say the peels taste very good. They make your tongue tingle, said Maomao, who had sampled them several times since learning that the skin and buds of a potato were poisonous. Yes, well, it's all those bandits will let us do. We try to make it taste a little better with this. The woman showed Maomao a jar filled with a mix of spices. You barely afford them potatoes, but you give them lots of spices. It went beyond salt and pepper. The blend included cinnamon, nutmeg and saffron, among other things. Those spices all had medicinal properties as well, so Maomao's eyes were shining. The woman replied, we don't have anything else to do with them. She continued, so the men attacked a caravan and brought these to us. Great. The woman said, we have no way to sell them, so they told us to use them however we wanted. What a waste. Ah, but it has its benefits. The woman explained, a bit of spice can do a lot to cover for crummy ingredients. She gave an example. For example, say we were to occasionally slip some rotten vegetables into the bandits' meals. The woman was positively grinning. I'm just so glad you turned out to be fellow believers, Chengsheng. She added, if you'd been unbelievers, oh, you would have been in for a hard time. How do you mean? Maomao asked, trying to look as calm as she could. One-Eyed Dragon wanted to cut the number of villagers in half. The woman said the Laoshi begged him not to, promised he would get us all to work for him, but tears sprang to the woman's eyes. One-Eyed Dragon said, then we will cut them down to half of half, and he made the Laoshi choose. This Laoshi had summoned the non-believers to be purged. There were little children there, playmates of my own little one. Everyone who could not possibly be used to do physical labor was. She broke off into a sob. Maomao glanced around, afraid that the man guarding them would think they weren't working. I understand. I'm sorry for bringing up such painful memories. Maomao rubbed the woman's back and gritted her teeth, wishing there was something she could do about this terrible one-eyed dragon. After a few days, Maomao had begun to get the lay of the land. The women vented their emotions by talking, which meant there was plenty for a newcomer like Maomao to hear. The boss might call himself One-Eyed Dragon, but he looked more like a bear, the women said. They went on about how he had muscles for brains, and his feet stank, the sort of thing. Maomao reflected. They could all be killed for saying if anyone overheard them. While One-Eyed Dragon might not have been very bright, he had a sharp intuition and held the outlaws together through his own strength. The rest of them are all small fry. If he weren't here, a woman was making rice and talking to Maomao, who was peeling potatoes for all she was worth. She tried to get the eyes off because the peels were going to be eaten. The room Maomao and Xiaohong had been dumped in was home to about 30 women and children. They were divided up by job. Most of the people in this room worked in the kitchen, while others did the laundry or cleaning. The village had once been home to 1,000 people or so. But after the insect swarm, about half of them left for other areas. Most of those who left were merchants. The ones who remained were largely farmers, those with nowhere else to go and true believers defending their church. It doesn't seem like there are actually that many bandits, maybe 50 give or take, but that was more than enough to attack a village of non-combatants. Once the outlaws had dealt with the soldiers sent from the western capital, it was all clerics and farmers here. Farmers usually have good builds, physically they are strong. They did not know how to fight. Lahan's brother was a good example of this. Considering the village's new oppressors had resorted to putting the men to bandit-like tasks, One-Eyed Dragon's followers probably were not much of a force. They were really just a rabble. You know, Maomao said, not sure if she should ask, but asking anyway. One-Eyed Dragon was talking about someone called Shikyou. Who is that? Oh, him. He is the man who put out that bear's eye years ago. That brute brought it on himself by attacking the caravan Shikyou was protecting, but the boss blames him just the same. Stupid oldest son. Maomao thought. Okay, it wasn't actually Shikyou's fault, but he was still the reason Maomao was in this fix. Of course, one could argue that Maomao had been dragged into this when Xiaohong came to get her. Damn it, she's too cute to blame. Maomao discovered she had some sympathy for the girl. She had spent so much time around whiny and obnoxious children that she couldn't help being smitten with a kid who actually listened and did as she was told. She could almost believe she might actually like children if all the kids in the world were like that. Princess Lingli was cute too, but that was work. She suddenly found herself remembering the Jade Pavilion. She wondered if all its residents were doing well. Seriously though, if she had known she was going to end up like this, she would have been better off just ignoring Xiaohong. And to think it was Hulan who had put her up to it. She knew she didn't like that guy. He had probably been trying to entrap Shikyou. It pisses her off. Maomao shook her fist. She didn't even put down the potato first. As her mind went around in circles, she finished peeling the potatoes. She put the peels and the vegetables on a cutting board. The potatoes would be steamed for the main course, while the peels would be finely chopped and stir-fried. Maomao picked up a potato peel and scowled at it. We need better stuff. From what Maomao heard, despite the talk of purging a quarter of the town's population, they hadn't actually all been killed. Those who were able to work were put to work. They were treated little better than slaves, so the food they received was poor. It was simply stir-fried potato skins with a dash of seasoning. Meanwhile, the bandits enjoyed precious sheep's meat and butter. The woman in charge of the cooking was not happy about this, but there wasn't much she could do. She did what she could by frying the potato peels after the meat, so they absorbed some of the flavor. Maomao gathered that it had not always been the way of this village to discriminate against people for believing in a different faith. The Laoshi's decision had prompted some dissension and resentment. Maomao heard one person remark, "It's awful abandoning little children just because they don't believe what we do." "I agree," someone else said. "The Laoshi is not the man I thought he was. Just look how he has cozied up to that big bear." At the same time, others took a different view. "We could have ended up dead ourselves. He had to make some kind of choice. They forced him." Still, the woman said as she put the potatoes in the pot, "We owe the unbelievers a lot. Even these potatoes were brought to us by a nice man who didn't share our beliefs." A nice man, different religion, Maomao thought. Just one face floated into her mind. Lahan's brother. This must have been one of the villages he'd visited when he was out teaching farming methods. Since they'd adopted potatoes as their staple food, it was fair to say he'd been successful. He only stayed for a few days, but he was such a hard worker. "If I were 10 years younger, I'd have proposed to him like that," said another of the aunties. "Yes, well, 10 years ago you were still already married, weren't you? He would have been perfect for my daughter, though. If he'd just stayed a few more days, I would have told her to sneak into his room one night." "Ah, yes, my neighbor said the same thing. Rumor had it that he looked like a farmer, but he actually came from a famous family." "Oh, stop with your jokes. You saw how he wielded that hoe. No pampered aristocrat could do that. That man comes from a line of farmers, make no mistake. He technically comes from a military family," Maomao thought, but she listened quietly. "I know what you mean. Oh, how he handled that hoe. Look at you, brother. The ladies love you." She wondered what Lahan's brother would think if he could hear what she was hearing. If she got out of this alive, maybe she would bring him back here to meet some nice girls. He might make someone here a very good son-in-law. Finally she ventured, "Excuse me." "Yes, Ksheng, what is it?" Maomao couldn't quite get used to that name, even though she had picked it herself. She wished she'd gone with something else, but nothing had come to mind, so she was stuck with Ksheng. Even the normally impassive Xiaohong seemed to think it was a dumb name. Did a female Byaroshi happen to come through here just before we arrived? We'd hired her as our bodyguard. She'd been wondering all this time. One of the women said as she tasted the food. I don't remember any fuss over something like that, but I have been in the kitchen this whole time. I don't always know much about what goes on outside. I'm not sure either, said another woman. When they come across a non-believer, a lot of the time they throw them in jail and figure out what to do with them later. Jail? Maomao asked. She had trouble believing the Byaroshi would get herself caught so easily, but then again she couldn't have predicted this situation. Maybe she had run, leaving Maomao and the others behind. Maomao groaned and set about chopping potato peels. I finished washing these, said Xiaohong, arriving with the potatoes. You're such a good worker for such a little girl, one of the women said, patting Xiaohong's head with a leathery palm. Xiaohong smiled shyly. We're so glad you're the hard-working kind, both of you. If you hadn't been any use in the kitchen, you would have been left to do some other kind of work. Is that worse than what goes on here? Maomao asked. Cleaning and laundry are such physical labor, and being sent to the fields isn't any better. There is no easy work, but at least kitchen service is mostly worry-free. There is just one thing you have to be careful of. What might that be? The woman pressed right up into Maomao's face. We take turns waiting on that big bear, 2 at a time. When it's your turn, do not try anything funny. One girl took a knife with her and tried to kill him when he wasn't looking. But the woman did not finish her sentence, but her dark expression said it all. The girl in question had not succeeded. What about poison then? Maomao thought. He never touches his food or drink without making the girls try them first to make sure they are not poisoned. Bah! Maomao took the pot, still slick with the juices from the meat, and tossed in the chopped potato peels. Chapter 20 The Bandit Village Part 2 Kshengshen, come here. You said you are a medicine woman, didn't you? Said the middle-aged woman who oversaw the kitchen staff. She looked troubled. Could you come with me for a moment? Certainly, ma'am. Maomao followed her to the edge of town, where they found a man lying on some dry grass. His breathing was harsh and irregular. One leg was bent in an unnatural direction. Half his face was swollen from a beating and blood dribbled from his mouth. Maomao suspected his teeth were broken. He was also covered in cuts. She thought he was not even 20 years old, still a boy. Maomao was already moving as she asked, what in the world happened here? She elevated the broken leg so it was higher than the young man's heart. Firewood for cooking lay nearby. She grabbed a piece and improvised a splint to brace the limb. At least the break was a clean one. If the bone had been shattered, she would have had to cut the leg open to extract the shards. He earned one-eyed dragon's special attention, the woman said. That's some attention. If there was a lesson here, it looked like it had gone too far. From the anxiety in the woman's eyes, Maomao guessed that the battered boy was one of the townspeople. When he gets tired of lying around and gorging himself, he picks someone to beat up. He calls it training. This isn't the worst we have seen. Sometimes he kills people. The auntie had a far-off look in her eyes. Kills people? That doesn't sound like what most of us would call training. I heard this young man actually landed a blow. It wasn't much, hardly more than a scratch, but that bear was so shocked that he bit the inside of his mouth. That was his excuse to beat this young man to a pulp. Trying to see if any broken teeth were left behind, Maomao looked into the bloody mess of the boy's mouth, then inserted a wadded-up rag. She wanted him to bite down on it since the pressure could help stop the bleeding, but she wasn't sure he was conscious. Can you bite down? She asked. The boy didn't say anything but nodded feebly. In an effort to stop the bleeding, she ended up using up all of her precious supply of pewong. She removed the young man's shirt and checked him over. Thankfully, nothing else seemed to be broken. Any injuries could have caused life-threatening damage to his internal organs. This is all I can do with what I have on hand, she told the other woman. What he needs now is nutritious food and some rest. He won't be getting those, the woman said unhappily. Anyone who can't work is thrown in with the non-believers. The best he can hope for is thin soup and potato skins. People there frequently have upset stomachs. Maybe it's because they're so undernourished. Maomao suspected it had more to do with the potato peels and sprouts. She had tried to remove the eyes when she was peeling the potatoes, but even then some of the poison could remain. Maybe I should say something, she thought, but the only outcome of voicing her concerns would be that the non-believers wouldn't have any food at all. In any case, thank you, the woman said. I'll get the men to carry this youngster away. You can go back. Yes, ma'am. Oh, but first she gestured to Maomao to come closer. She went, curious about what the woman wanted. It turned out to be the clothing Maomao and Xiaohong had been wearing when they arrived. Maomao had never dreamed she would see it again. I patched the torn spots. I suggest you hide these somewhere. If anyone sees them, they'll snatch them for themselves. You can count on that. Thank you very much. Maomao bowed her head and studied the clothing. She didn't remember anything that needed patching. Maybe their clothes had gotten caught on something as they ran through the forest. Her inspection yielded traces of stitching on the sleeves, and she caught her breath. The woman had done much more than patching. She'd added elaborate embroidery in the shape of a bird. On the inside of the sleeves, where you would never find it if you weren't looking for it, there was a delicately embroidered sparrow. Could this mean something? The embroidery turned out to be delicate letters masquerading as an elaborate pattern. They were in a foreign language, and Maomao could only just manage to read them. Dinner service create opening. She doubted this sequence of words was pure coincidence. She looked up at the middle-aged woman, who had already turned away. Come to think of it, if you want to survive, forget your cozy domestic life. At the time the woman had spoken those words, Maomao hadn't actually told her that she and Xiaohong were a mother and child.